All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the Chamber of Commerce Coffee with a Candidate conversation. These are recorded so that both the candidates and the Chamber can help spread the word about the position and the person that is asking for your vote in the upcoming election. And with us this morning, Tom Sottek. He is seeking your vote for the House of Representatives to represent you at the state legislature. And if you would, Tom, will you take just a few minutes and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you want the voters to know about your campaign?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity again. It's a unique time, and I think it's good for everyone to have alternatives and opportunities to educate themselves on candidates that are running for office. So my name is Tom Sottek, and I have lived in the Wilson County community, Mount Juliet formerly, and now out in the Lebanon area, just north of Friendship Christian, for about 8 years. My wife's an orthodontist at Snodgrass King here in Mount Juliet, and we look to partner within that community or that business shortly. So we don't expect to be going really anywhere in the long term. We have 4 children who attend Wilson County schools. Formerly, in a past history, I was the president of PTO for Rutland Elementary School. And with that experience and the access within the rabbit hole, you might call it, within public education, I found myself running for school board in 2016, ran uncontested as the incumbent did have obligations with work. So that provided me the opportunity to have an inside view into local public education and build relationships within the community, whether it be administration relationships, principals, teachers, businesses I may have mentioned, representatives, county commissioners, and just stakeholders within the community to help educate and understand what our needs are for Wilson County when it comes to education, for example. So this campaign primarily is just a kind of a conglomeration of all the experiences that I've had and conversations that I've had over the past several years, which kind of culminated and came to a peak with the recent sales tax referendum in March. I had an individual come up to me. I had moved from my current zone as a school board member because we did move out of the zone, so I had to resign from that position, and didn't expect myself to be in a position of having any type of political conversations again. However, when the referendum came up for the sales tax, it was kind of fell into a few of our laps to advocate for it. Which is something we have done in the past, which is advocate for teacher pay. And I think this campaign is primarily trying to find the voice of those within the community that are somewhat tired of the establishment being Democratic or Republican with agendas that may not typically align with what our needs are at a local level. I think when you look at a national level and where we are with the presidential election, and we now have an open seat with the Supreme Court Justice, and with Ruth Bader Ginsburg having passed away, may she rest in peace, I think the Republican agenda probably is on a course where they probably will feel comfortable moving forward, whether the current administration is to win the presidential election or not. Having said that, when the emphasis is placed on some of these national issues, I think a lot of times what people recognize, business people, folks who pay attention to public education, is that a lot of policies and legislation at the state level may get overlooked or may not have that type of support because we have this agenda being pushed that a lot of people are just kind of tired of. And so when I mention that I'm running as an independent, they get reinvigorated because I think they're looking for an alternative and something different. And that's what this campaign is truly about. And bringing individuals into this campaign who are local community stakeholders to have those conversations, whether they're constitutional conservatives or whether they're moderates or progressives, and just trying to bring a voice to where, number one, we protect the Tennessee values and we protect the Tennessee Constitution, which is fully aligned with the U.S. Constitution. That's number one. Number two is then looking at legislative policies that directly impact Wilson County, and I can get into a few of those, but I think we have been left behind slightly, and we have an opportunity to change that if we can change the conversation at the state level, and that's what we would like to try to accomplish with this campaign.
What are some of the most important matters that you see facing the state of Tennessee, and perhaps more specifically, those in the district that you're wanting to represent?
So I think and I go back to education because it's really hard to overlook the fact that 70% of our budget is public education here in Wilson County. And when you look at the budget at a larger scale at the state level, it actually it's not as quite expansive. The amount of dollars that go into education is very large. However, it's not the largest line item budget like it is here in Wilson County and for other counties within the district. So I think one of the pressing issues that we have here in Wilson County is that we are experiencing we're really the benefactors of a great Tennessee economy, and a lot of people are moving into Wilson County, but that artificially drives our income up, which means that by percent over time, the amount of money we get from the state of Tennessee goes down. So that then in turn, you have to look at where is that funding going to come from if it's not coming from the state of Tennessee, and how can we change that so it's not falling on, first of all, local business owners, because they are the lion's share of our property taxes. They pay a higher assessment. And then you have property owners as well who may be on a single income or a fixed income. They might be retired or what have you. And those are all important conversations that we need to have as a community where we're working together, both Mount Juliet, Lebanon as a county and state, so that we have a plan moving forward and we all are working in conjunction together. I really don't feel like a lot of people feel like that is happening. And that's one aspect. From a statewide level, I think what we're experiencing is, number one, we're in a pandemic. So I think it's important that the funding that comes in from a federal level and that we have at a state level is appropriated correctly to businesses who have had suffered during this pandemic and may continue to suffer depending on the decisions being made at the governor's level. One issue I think that needs to be addressed is definitely the executive orders that the governor is able to implement without a lot of feedback from the local community. From a personal note, when my wife, being a dentist, had an executive order of having to be closed up until May 18th, that was largely due to the fact there was no PPE. And when I made phone calls to understand what was the state doing to help alleviate the concern for local businesses that were elective surgeries or hospitals or dentists that could reopen safely, I found that there really wasn't an answer, and they had several months to try to help us, and it was all very last minute. So the leadership in that area, I think, probably needs to change and bring in the appropriate people when they have these committees to ensure that representation as a whole aren't just the people who have a seat at the table because they were large donors or they were a PAC or an insurance company that is prevalent and they have these lobbyists. I think it's important that we have stakeholders within the community that are largely involved with these conversations, because ultimately we are the ones who have to bear the burden of the decisions being made by the governor or of the decisions being made by our state legislation. So there's been a lot that has surfaced up during this pandemic time, which I think is an opportunity for us to look at how is our state approaching, emergency issues? What is the plan moving forward? And so far I haven't really seen one. And how is that going to impact our local businesses so that if heaven forbid this does peak again or something like that in the winter time, what is the plan? Do we have a plan to ensure that our businesses are protected? As Tennessee as a whole, I think as an economy, Tennessee is very attractive for a lot of individuals. They come here because we have no state income tax. They come here because they may have conservative values and they find this is a comfortable place to live, and they want to have the right to bear arms, and they want to be able to, practice Christianity or whatever. There is a very strong Tennessee value system that I have found talking to conservatives within the community where that's very important to them. And I think it's important to protect that here at the state level, while also looking at business implications and decisions being made for local constituents here in Wilson County, Tennessee.
When you talk about certain businesses, we've done I think most would agree that in the district, maybe in the state, some of that is because of the corridor I-40. We're within 75% of the population within an 8 to 10 hour drive. So we've become known for our distribution. Some of the big names, FedEx, Starbucks, and probably nobody's making a bigger stamp on Tennessee right now than Amazon. one of the largest buildings for that particular type of use on the planet is
Right.
halfway done in Mount Juliet. But there's also, at some point, what type of, there's a lot of discussion at the state level about how should we incentivize, if they want to be here, they'll come. What types of businesses, industry do you think would help keep Tennessee on the glide path it's on for those values and economic drivers that you talked about?
That's really interesting because I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because when you look at companies like Amazon or some of these companies that may be located in some of these hubs that have access to a workforce when it comes to software or when it comes to computers, I think an opportunity that Tennessee needs to be looking at, well, there's twofold. First of all, you have the opportunity of ensuring that there are students here in Tennessee that are put into a system that provides them an opportunity so we grow and expand that workforce so we can attract those types of businesses here in Tennessee. When you talk about like an Amazon or you talk about an Apple, I think Amazon was looking at moving their headquarters or having a second headquarters, and Tennessee was a part of that discussion. The issue, though, is that the workforce really isn't here in Tennessee, so everyone would have to move to Tennessee. So that's one issue where we have to look at how do we expand our education so that we expand the workforce in the future so that businesses can look and say, okay, Tennessee actually has the folks who have the talent and the skills to do that. So this is a viable option without having to move our entire headquarters and the people with us. We want to expand, not just simply move. The other issue I think too that Tennessee is facing is our technical trade. We have folks here, local businesses who are struggling to try to find plumbers or electricians, because again, if you go back to education, you look at the local school board, there have been opportunities and several examples of the school board voting unanimously to send a resolution down to the state capitol, be it standardized testing or vouchers. And if we go back to standardized testing, there's a significant missed opportunity at the state level, and it's underfunded too, to expand technical trade, to ensure that we have folks and students who may not be on that career path of college, but we have a viable industry where as we continue to grow, we continue to have, businesses thriving and we're building things, that things don't become too expensive because we're having to bring people from other states to actually accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. Because again, we don't have the workforce here in Tennessee because we're solely focused on getting these kids college ready, when in fact, there's a myriad of careers that they could have that could set Tennessee up for the future and make it extremely sustainable so that we're not having to focus on or rely heavily on federal funding all the time.
I know we have some success stories right here in this district with what's coming out of the TCAT in Lebanon and some of the amazing programs that I see in the school. You know them better. You were there and probably helped put some of them in place, everything from robotics to biotechnology at Lebanon High School or whatever. Amazing.
Exactly. I think that's one part where the administration has done really well is they've taken what they've been given and they've created a community here in Wilson County that's very attractive, and we need to ensure that we continue to allow it to remain sustainable. I think that is the challenge. That is the challenge as we continue to grow. How do we remain sustainable so that we're not impacting those folks who have lived here their entire life and they're having to bear the burden of all the new folks coming in? Having been a new person myself, and talking to those folks who have lived here and they're Wilson County Tennesseans and they have been through and through for generations, and they see this changing, I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose that, as well as making sure that we have a plan in place that allows us, again, to not fall too far behind to where, I'm going to go back to the corridor you mentioned, 840. So a lot of folks come from Cookeville and the east side of the county, Smith County, to come shop in Providence, for example. My concern is as like a Costco opens up in the Murfreesboro area, and that 840 corridor is very simple to travel down, what's going to prevent folks from Lebanon or maybe Smith County or Cookeville to just continue on the 840 corridor and shop down there at a Target or a Costco, because the traffic load in Providence has become too much? So where are we at in the queue at a state level to ensure that not only do we remain sustainable on a local economic, we're not deterring shoppers and we're not deterring those folks who want to come out and eat, ensuring that we have proper mitigation for traveling through Mount Juliet, and so that people shop here in Wilson County, not elsewhere.
Well, whoever is our representative at the State House, we want to put a plug in for whatever you can do for the Central Pike interchange. And
that's exactly right. And it's not so much the people who live there. It's the folks who say, well, I could go to Target and wherever else in Providence, but I could drive an extra 20 minutes down to Murfreesboro and shop at the new Costco and Target, kill two birds with one stone, and not have to deal with the traffic. Because we do have a lot of folks coming up from the Antioch area and traveling down to that. They work in Smyrna or what have you, and they come back home. We want to ensure that is top of discussion for sure. And then the Bender's Ferry and Lebanon Road area, you have a lot of folks in the Lebanon area who would come into that North Mount Juliet area to shop, but simply the traffic is just a deterrent.
As someone who makes multiple turns off of Bender's Ferry onto Lebanon Road each and every day.
Yeah, I don't know how those poor high school students, they're over there. I mean, everybody just like, oh, there's a light again. We got to keep waiting. So
I can vouch for that as well. So
that's largely the focus, I think, is what I'm hearing from individuals is they're not unhappy necessarily with the Tennessee General Assembly when it comes to the agenda that's been driven down there largely. I think where a lot of folks kind of come out and they say, well, is they're looking at when you start talking about localism, and this pandemic has been very interesting because the governor has said the county is going to decide on mandates for masks. The county and the city is going to, we're leaving it up to the local schools, we're leaving it up to the local counties. But then when it comes to these state mandates for schools that are unfunded, there's a definite dichotomy that is not lining up with what we're being told and what is expected of us. And the transparency really isn't there, from my opinion, from the incumbent to bring forward the issues that are being put on the table so that we can all learn from them and that we can get input from the community and take that input from the community, be it town halls, be it, telephone conversations, and figure out what's best for not only Tennessee, but Wilson County and move that forward. Because when you talk about, in 2018, we want to raise a tax for schools, right? We want to build more schools. It fails. In 2020, it passes. 61% of the folks in this district passed that sales tax referendum for our teachers. So education is top of mind. And when you look at bills that have been introduced, for instance, that would give our county millions of dollars by tweaking ratios within the formula for the BEP funding, yet they're not supported. And on top of that, we have vouchers being supported where that money that could come to our county is going to two counties. People begin to question, what is the motive from the governor's office and what is the motive from our incumbent as far as helping our local community again. And the number one thing is remaining sustainable so that our school system continues to grow. The businesses continue to thrive because of the school systems. People move here, there's no doubt about it because of that. But we don't want to continue to have that burden placed upon us on a local tax burden, which we've already done time and time again. What can the state do to help growing counties like Wilson County to ensure that we remain sustainable, but again, also protect our Tennessee values and the Tennessee Constitution, because that's largely why a lot of people will move here too, and that cannot be forgotten.
Yeah, as many of us know, much like the success of Nashville, helps all of Tennessee. Certainly, the wealth and prosperity and the education of Wilson County certainly is a driver in that Nashville economy.
Absolutely. And it's going to continue to be a driver because of its proximity to the airport. And my vision as a state representative, for those listening who listen to me ramble throughout this entire time, is to ensure that we as a community, Mount Juliet, because I always hear about the 109 divide, but what's interesting about this district is that a large portion of it is over across that 109 area. So we have the Gladeville, Mount Juliet community, and then you also have the Tuckers community and the Carolocum community that are all a part of this district. And I think if we think about it as a whole, as how can we ensure that Wilson County is put first, for example, a lot of those questions will come to head with solutions as we all work together to ensure that agenda that we want to have is fulfilled. Because at the end of the day, if you're somebody who's going to be living in Tennessee for the next 30 years and Wilson County for the next 30 years, what do you want that to look like? Are the cities working in conjunction with one another as well as the county and the state to ensure that we're all on the same page. And we try to get what we can from the state, what's available as far as grants, what's available as far as potential legislation, what legislation should be supported that also supports our local communities, be it our police officers. I had a conversation with the chief of police in Mount Juliet, and said, we could really use a mental health unit. And the question I asked during this pandemic with some of these police officers, I said, what kind of calls are you hearing from individuals who are now at home? And they said, oh, mental health is number one. Mental health is number one. And when you have the state of Tennessee cut mental health by $250 million, and you have the state of Tennessee cut teacher pay by 4% because of the pandemic, and we have all these issues coming to head, which really directly impact people, real, actual people, that's the concern that many of us have. So there's a lot that can be brought to the table. And within the first 100 days, I think as this election kind of plays out and see, who's the mayor of Mount Juliet, who's the mayor of Lebanon, we know who the mayor of the county is, who's going to be the state representative. Can we get together and have a conversation about what do we want our community to look like now in the next 15 years and next 30 years, come up with a plan so that we can remain sustainable and get what we can get from the state and work on all those goals together. And that's the only way I think we can do it to ensure that we don't fall too far behind, truthfully.
What a great way to wrap it up. Would you share with us the best way for people to either go glean more information about your campaign or maybe even to reach out to you personally with a website?
Absolutely. So my cell phone is public. It's been public since I've been on the school board, and that number is 615-830-7960. Call me. Also, my website is tomsottek.com. And if you go to the website or go to Facebook and you just search Tom Sottek, my page will show up. And you'll be able to see kind of the thought process that I have with regards to the community and current events and this type of thing. But I think the number one thing is to not get distracted by national issues and allow our local communities to kind of basically be put on the back burner, because we have very emotional conversations about what our ideological views are. And I think this campaign is just bringing a lot of people kind of more towards the middle. I lean a little bit to the right, and that might upset some people on the left. But the fact of the matter is that I look at it from a business point of view and say, okay, where do we want to be? How are we going to get there? And how are we going to work together to make sure that's accomplished? So thank you for your time.
Very good. Thank you. And I want to encourage everybody, I'm sure as Tom does, early voting starts on October the 14th. Please go exercise your right to have a voice. If you miss early voting, the election is on November 3rd. On behalf of the chamber, I'd like to welcome you or wish you and all of the candidates who've stepped up and asked to be a public servant. We want to thank you and wish you the best of luck in your campaign going forward.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.